Hey there. So, you take a good look around right now. It's a pretty gloomy day. Rained a lot today. It's cold, windy. Really not a lot of things you can do on a day like today. Or is there? So, even though you might not be able to change the weather, you can change your strings. Changing your strings is really not a difficult thing to do, but you do have to be careful of a few things so that you don't end up breaking a string. One of the questions that comes up is how often should one choose to change their strings? And the answer to that is it really depends on how much you play. I play a lot. By that I mean I practice regularly. I do get calls to do some performing in small ensembles or even an orchestra, and that kind of ups the practice time. So I put a lot of mileage on my strings and on my bow and my instrument overall. So what I try to do is, at the very least, I change them once a year, if not more so than that, depending on how much I play. And also depending on the type of strings that I use. I tend to buy strings that I know are going to hold up and have a long playing life to them. And even if you have to pay a little bit extra for that, that's a good idea, because then you can set them and you're good to go. I've really liked these as of late. The Alpha U strings by Tomastic. They are kind of like a student level intermediate string, actually. They're comparable to D'Addario's Helicore strings, comparable in price and also in composition. But what I found about them is that D'Addario's, after a while, go dead pretty quickly within about 7 to 8 months. And these have lasted, I've had a set on my cello for over a year, and now it's getting to the point where I need to change them. So that's a pretty good playing life. So we're going to start with a good quality set of strings that's going to last us a while, and there's a process by which we need to change our strings. So let's look into that. So we're going to get started with changing the strings on the cello. This is a good thing to demonstrate cello, or really string changing overall, because the instrument's big and you can see what's going on. But the same process is true for a violin or a viola. A bass is a little bit different because it's more like changing guitar strings, literally, because it's a geared tuner. You can use a string winder and it goes actually very, very quickly. The thing you want to do with any of those instruments, whether you're a violin player, violoncello, bass player, whatever it might be, you want to only change one string at a time. There's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, if you take off all four strings at the same time, your bridge is going to fall off, your tailpiece is going to hit the body of the instrument and scratch it up, and probably worse than all of those things is that the sound post on the inside of the instrument was probably going to fall. And if that falls, then it's really a difficult thing to get that put back in place by yourself. You really have to take into a shop and wait for them to do the repair and all of that. So it's best to change just one string at a time, because all of those parts that I mentioned are held onto the instrument by the pressure of the strings and not by glue or anything else. So that's the first thing. The other thing is that when you take one string off and you put the new one on, the other three strings are pretty well, or at least close to being in tune, and it helps you to tune everything up much, much quicker. So let's get started with the A string. First thing I want to do, I'm going to take my A string and I'm going to loosen it. That's really loose. Usually I do this facing me, but I'm doing this so I can face the camera. And do that to where the peg spins very, very freely. And then at the bottom, this is a good time to maybe adjust your fine tuners. If they're in all the way, you can loosen those up as well. And so I'm going to take this now out of the fine tuner. And then we have the A string now removed. The best thing you can do with this right now is keep this in your case if it's remotely salvageable, because if you get in a situation where you break a string, you might want to have a spare. So I always keep my extra strings for a few different cycles of changes, and then I either donate that to my string collection at school, because you never know when you need one in a pinch. If you're really industrious about things, you can tie your muffler up if it falls off of your car with one of these. They're really good for that too. All right. Again, I like the Alpha U strings, and one of the things that's really great about that is they actually tell you what the string is on the package. Some string brands will just have like a color-coded system. I'm red-green colorblind to a certain extent, and that's actually very frustrating for me. So I like that it says Cello A. I can't go wrong, put the D string on there accidentally. So we take out the new string. Of course, this is the silk end. This is the end that goes into the peg. And then you've got a brass end. This is what's going to go into your fine tuner, or if you have just the slot in your tailpiece, it would go there as well. But most instruments are going to have fine tuners at least on a couple of your strings. So let's go ahead and get this in place. I'm just going to turn this toward me really quickly. When you take the peg and look at it, there's definitely a hole that you can see, and this is really like threading a needle. So you have to do it with the peg intact, of course. But just put about that much of the string into the peg. Just go in slightly to where it hits the back of the peg box, and then so you threaded the needle, and you're just going to put some rotations on the peg, and you will see it spool up like a thing of thread. Now I always do that first because that just seems to hold it better. Then I take the brass end and insert that into the fine tuner. So I'm going to reach down here and put a little more tension on the string. And this again is also like threading a needle in some ways. And so I have this much slack on the string. And I always hold on to it like this, because if I don't, it's going to fall out of the peg, it's going to fall out of the fine tuner, then you have to start the whole process over again. And it's a little more difficult once the string has been bent a little bit. It doesn't want to stay put. Alright, so now here's my C string, G to D. Here's the new A. Put some tension on that. I'm going to back this out and start over a little bit. So now my A string is in tune. I haven't checked it with the tuner, but it's pretty close. So this is a good starting point. Once your string is in place and you like the way everything looks here and then at the bottom, what I also like to do is go like this and pull on it, stretch it out. It takes a little bit of time to break these in, but this kind of speeds that process up, and then it's more stable. So you see it went a little bit flat, so we're going to go like this. And there we have an in-tune A string. So basically, the process is the same for the D, the G, and the C. Or if you're, tuning a violin in the E, the A, the D, and the G string. So I hope that gives you some things to work with in doing your own strings. It takes a little bit of time. Feel free to block out about a half hour to do it, because it is something that you want to spend some time doing and doing correctly. So if you have any questions, give me a shout out in the comments section, or you know how to get a hold of me, my students, through my email and Google Classroom. And look forward to hearing how well you're able to do these kinds of things.